Welcome everyone back to the studio here in Appledorn. We are happy to have you here again as visitors and viewers to this session that we have looked very much forward to about the work of FIG. And with me today, behind me at the screens, I have Hartmut Müller, who is a ACCO representative and the Commission Chair, and Michael Lilje, who is Vice President. And if you haven't been in the previous session, he was just re-elected Vice President for the next coming 4 years. And next to me, I have Crit Lemon. It's very nice to have you in the studio here. We are keeping our corona distance, so that's why we are located so far from each other, but it's good to see you here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. But now I will give the word to Michael and Hartmut, please.
Thank you, Louise. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope it's, I don't know if it's a good morning, good evening, whatever it is, you're most welcome. So the virtual FIG Working Week is coming to its end, and we only have the fourth part of the General Assembly left before we go into the closing ceremony. Personally, I think the Working Week has been better than I anticipated, but I do miss all the small talks that occur when we meet. And beside the small talk, don't we all also missing the eating, drinking, dancing, singing together perhaps? FIG is an organization that is very broad in its scope. We are active from grassroots level to the UN level. And we are seen as an important international organization representing the field of surveyors. This session, it will highlight some of our achievements and involvements. It is, as Louise said, it's impossible to cover all. But in this session, we will hear from FIG's work related to land administration domain model, African water governance, international boundaries, surveying history, global land tool network, FIG community surveyor program, and we will also celebrate 20 years of the FIG Foundation. It is truly fascinating that our organization can encourage participation from those who are just about to enter their careers to those who have stayed active long way after their retirement. It is also interesting to see how we are crucial for the development of standards to be a vital body on the to be a vital body on the highest political level. As Louise said, my name is Michael Lilje, and I'm together here with Hartmut Müller. But Hartmut, before we invite the first guest to the stage, why and when did you become part of the FIG family?
Well, Michael, good afternoon. First of all, again, my warmest congratulations this time face-to-face on your re-election as Vice President. Back to your question, my first contact with FIG was, you won't believe it, back in 1981 at the FIG Congress in Montreux, Switzerland. I was part of a team that had to take care of our university's booth at the exhibition. I was just finishing my PhD and I was not that interested in FIG. Old man in dark suits, except fresh FIG honorary member Robin McLaren, who was also present, as I learned just this morning. Otherwise, well, those men talking about things that meant almost nothing to me. Today, I'm one of them. Years later, about 20 years ago or so, I became part of FIG, more specifically of Commission 3 on Spatial Information Management. Now, why FIG? I love the international flair, the common ground with all people around the world, both professionally and personally. And why Commission 3? I don't have a clear answer to that. Why fall in love with one woman and not another? Over time, we've grown closer and closer, Commission 3 and me, and she in German language, a commission is a she still inspires me.
Oh, that was a really interesting answer. Thank you, Hartmut. And I also noted that it was the same conference for Robin McLaren as for you. So perhaps you even met then without knowing it. But being active in FIG, what has it given to your career?
Well, seen through the lens of a university professor, my daily job, not so much from my employer's side, other than the general freedom to use part of my time freely. But it has helped me a lot to keep track of what is going on in our industry around the globe. Through the years, it has opened my eyes for the needs of developing countries. And it has given me the opportunity to travel to some unusual destinations, such as North Korea several times.
North Korea, that sounds very amazing. Thank you, Hartmut. With that, I think it's time we start. I think the audience is eager to hear about from the first guests that we have. We would like to remind everyone that it is possible to send in questions during the presentations and the discussions. But we need to tell you, you need to be quick. We will have, as you probably understand, several short presentations and discussions, and the invited guests are not supposed to come back afterwards. So if you have a specific question, just post it in the Q&A as usual, as we have learned throughout this week. And we'll try to have a close eye on the Q&A and ask the presenters about that. And with that, I would like to invite our first guest, and they will discuss standards, and especially the land administration domain model. So therefore, I would like to welcome David Martin and Crit Lemon for this part. David, as we all know, is the chair of the FIG Network on Standards. He's also head of the ESRF Alignment and Geodesy Group. And ESRF stands for European Synchrotron Radiation Facility. That's a question you can ask David next time you see him, what it is. And Crit is the editor of the ISO standard on the land administration domain model. It's an ISO number 19152, and also professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning and Geoinformation Management at the Faculty of ITC. We will start that David will give us a short presentation. So David, please, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mikael. I can't see the
Here it
presentation. Comes. Okay, it's coming up. So yeah, is it come up? Yeah. Okay, so
yes, you can
responsible for the standards network. So what is a standard? In essence, a standard is an agreed way of doing something. Okay, it could be about making a product, managing a process, delivering a service, or supplying materials. The standards can cover a huge range of activities undertaken by organization and used by their customers. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is a standard that most of us are familiar with, all of us, indeed, the meter. Originally, the meter was to be 1/10,000,000th of the distance between the pole and the equator. In 1792, during the chaos of the French Revolution, two French astronomers, Delambre and Méchain, set out in opposite directions from Paris, one north to Dunkirk and the other south to Barcelona, to measure the world. In 1799, the meter was redefined in terms of a prototype meter bar. And then again, in 1899, it was redefined by the BIPM, the Bureau International des Points de Mesure. And given this is an example given to the United States, which served as a standard for defining all units of length in US from 1893 to 1960. I think I'm on the wrong slide there. Yeah, that's okay. Today, the meter is defined in terms of the speed of light, and this is the last adopted standard in 2018. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, a standard links a supplier and a customer. Suppliers, typically organizations and businesses, exist to fulfill a need. They are successful when they satisfy the needs, requirements, and expectations of their stakeholders, and a special stakeholder is the customer. Customers need quality products and services delivered on time and at a price that provides value for money. Standards ensure quality products and services are reliable, functional, durable, secure, available, and traceable, while quality services reflect competence, responsiveness, integrity, reliability, credibility. Standards play a role in what we do. Surveyors and FIG are both suppliers and consumers of quality products and services. The next slide, please. Okay, the FIG Standards Network is responsible for standardization in FIG. And there are several standards initiatives, notably the ISO, International Organization for Standardization. We participate in several technical commissions, TC211, which is Geographical Information and Geomatics. There's a large number of standards under that. TC176, Subcommission 6, Survey Instruments Standards. And TC307, more recently, Blockchain and Electronic Distributed Ledger Technologies. But not only that, we are also involved with a number of non-ISO standards. For example, the International Property Measurement Standards Coalition, International Land Measurement Standards, International Construction Measurement Standards, standards in hydrography with IHO and other bodies. And so most of the FIG commissions are involved in one way or another in these different standards activities. Have the next slide, please. One special standard is ISO TC11 19152, Land Administration Domain Model. Next slide, please. Now, the Land Administration Domain Model is a reference to support implementation of an interoperability between land administration systems. Okay, the next slide, Yip. ISO 19152 LADM is currently being revised and updated. And this is the reason there was a workshop dedicated to LADM during this working week. Now, I'm going to turn over the discussion to Krit, who's in the studio, who will give more details about the workshop. But before that, I just want to draw your attention to this wonderful word cloud that was created by the participants during the LADM workshop sessions. Thank you for your attention, and I think it's now to Krit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, David. But before we turn our attention to Krit, may I ask you, can you please elaborate a little bit more on the importance of standards in surveying?
Yeah, Mikael, standards are very important in surveying. Standards pervade everything that we do, really. All of the instruments that we use will measure the same distance to within a designated instrument uncertainty, okay? GNSS is underpinned by a host of standards. In addition to LADM, the TC211, for example, is responsible for 87 other standards used in the field of digital geographic information. So standards provide us with consistency, reliability, and confidence in what we do. They're essential to modern life. Indeed, just marvel at what we've accomplished this week, a fully virtual FIG working week. This would not be possible without standards.
Thanks, David. So Krit, David's presentation ended with a slide on the LADM. With your experience and insights, what is LADM for you?
Yeah, thank you, Mikael. Maybe I can add something to your introduction, because you said that I'm the editor, but also Peter van Oostrom from Delft University is editor of the LADM. I think he should be mentioned. Yeah, what does it mean to me? You mean personally?
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, I committed a big part of my life to the development of this LADM based on experiences from many countries. And there I learned that it is not so easy to develop such a data model. And the data model is, of course, let's say, the core, the heart, the essence of a land administration. And it is really difficult to design such a model in that way that it is applicable all over the country.
But who is? Can you please elaborate more on why is the LADM needed, and who are using it today?
Well, the people who are using LADM are in potential all people who are busy with land information. So that is the data collectors, the people who maintain the data, the people who manage the data, and also the users. So it is really a big community. And they need let's say, interoperability in such a way that they can communicate from the field to the office, from the cadastral office to the registry, from the registry to the users community.
But LADM, it's also an ISO standard. Is this important for the usage?
You know, I tell you, ISO is really a label. It's worldwide recognized by the industry, by national governments. Everybody is using ISO standards, and here in the studio, I'm sure we are surrounded by standards. So this label is really important, and that's why it is used, because it is really important if you have a standard that it is used by a user community. So it is.
So yeah. But David mentioned also that LADM is under a revision currently. Can you please elaborate a little bit more on why is there a revision at this stage?
That is, by the way, that is a normal process in standardization. ISO wants to keep the standards alive so that they meet the current requirements. So such a revision is requested for each standard by ISO every 5 or 10 years. And we are in such a process of revision now, together with the users community.
So it's more of the normal procedure, normal cycle within the ISO.
Yeah,
but what about other organizations then?
Yeah,
are there others involved?
It is also, let's say, important to meet the requirements from today. Let's say the edition that was published in 2012 was focusing on land tenure, rights, people-to-land relationships. There was no attention to land use and land valuation. And the World Bank requested for a standard on land valuation because if the valuation process is properly organized, governments are able to collect taxes and maybe less independent from other countries. And also from IHO, there was a request, let's say, to pay attention to marine boundaries and marine space. So there are new requirements, and we hope to extend the standard in accordance to those requirements and in cooperation with all those organizations. By the way, also UNGGIM will be involved, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, because this valuation modeling, we will do that together with Commission 9, but also with RICS, so that it is really a matter of good cooperation.
It's very interesting. I think we will need to come back to the revision quite many times in the coming years and follow it very closely, and not just from the
I hope so. I hope so. Yes.
Any final remarks or messages to the member organizations?
Well, I hope that we can cooperate and that we pay a lot of attention to the development of that standard. We had a very successful workshop yesterday. There were 4 sessions that they were really crowded, and in the closing session, OGC was represented. They invited FIG to develop an alliance, to develop structural cooperation. UNGGIM was represented, so they can bring the global requirements. There was a statement from the World Bank. And I'm sure that Global Land Tool Network, and we are cooperating as FIG with GLTN, that they will be involved. They were involved together with UN Habitat in the development of the first edition. So it will be a cooperation, and that is also my invitation to the world. Please cooperate, please help us in the development of that standard.
Thank you, Krit. Thank you for the inputs, and also thank you, David, for setting the scene with on the necessity of standards. Thank you very much, both of you. So I think, and I haven't seen any questions from the Q&A. I still encourage you all to send in questions, but now we have to move on into the program, and I will hand over to Hartmut.
Okay, thank you.
We will here in the studio have a change. So thank you very much, Chris. And here Mariah comes in.
Yes, thank you.
And over to you, Hartmut.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, thank you, Louise. Back in 1995, Ismail Serageldin, then vice president of the World Bank, warned, I quote, "If the wars of this century, the 20th century, were fought over oil, the wars of the next century will be fought over water, unless we change our approach to managing this precious and vital resource." Our next topic is water, and our guest is Mariah Loesma. Mariah is chair of FIG Commission 8 on spatial planning and development. Mariah, you are Dutch, so you are a native expert in water governance. All the more so since you grew up in a polder 7 meters below sea level, as you told me. Today, you are taking us to Africa, to water governance challenges and to good practice for resilience planning. Today, you have the privilege to take not only the virtual, but even the physical floor here in the studio. So enjoy it. The word is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Hartmut, for the introduction. And indeed, I grew up 7 meters below the sea level. But yeah, actually, in practice, I never realized when I was a child. So, but yeah, so if I'm a native expert, I don't dare to say. But yeah, we are here today to discuss the report that has been launched this working week. It's about good practice for resilience planning to address water governance challenges in Africa. And I would first like to take you with the, to show you the societal relevance actually of the topic. Because water governance is needed to give people equitable access to drinking water, for example. And we also need water governance to prevent any floods, so there's safety measures. And of course, we also use rivers for transportation, etc. And it's an important resource for agriculture, industry, and also for ecosystems. Water is so much important. So there, I think we have the relevance already also for FIG because, well, as you mentioned already, Hartmut, I think it's a very precious resource that always has a location and will also affect the, the landowners and the title holders in the field out there. They will face the negative effects of, changing, now I need to push.
Yeah, you have to give it a presidential push.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, so we face various challenges actually with water governance because we often say the climate crisis is a water crisis. Because we face changeable precipitation patterns among others. So farmers that sow their crops, they are hampered by the lacking rainfall. And so also we have areas that are flooded, and of course drought is also an important challenge. And also melting glaciers, for example. I mean, some rivers tend to dry up in the coming decades, perhaps, or at least do not deliver so much water anymore for irrigation and other resources. But apart from the water quantity issues, we also address the water quality, because there's also a lot of pollution that also hampers the use of water, like the plastic soup, chemical wastewater, the pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. But I won't go into detail about these problems, but this shows that there is a need for a resilient approach in water governance. And we can either follow a mitigation approach or an adaptation approach. And the first addresses, to prevent any further damage, and adaptation is more related to, well, change the ways how you use water to minimize the effects. Well, and this was actually the main source or the main topic of the report that has been published. And I have to say my thanks to Richard Paget, and who is the main author of this report, and also led, together with Isaac Boateng, the working group well, about this topic. Yes, and well, I would recommend that you would read the report, of course, because I think it holds valuable lessons to learn, also for the FIG community, and in particular, according to the land-water nexus, where, well, the individual landowners and land users are affected by climate change and the effect on water. And I think to really tackle the challenges, we need a powerful governance that goes beyond the administrative boundaries, because, well, water does not acknowledge the administrative boundaries. The catchment areas do not align with the administrative boundaries, like country borders, etc. So, well, this is my main short introduction, and well, Hartmut, I think we can discuss for quite some time about the importance, and I'm not sure if there's anything specific you would like to address.
Yes, sure. I have many questions, but let me start first with one from the Q&A. Yeah, thanks for your clear introduction here, and I have a question from Claire Buxton. What adaptation methods are you seeing through your research? Perhaps the best method and the worst example?
Ooh. Well, this is a difficult question. Now we're really going into the topic. No, of course, I mean, there's
Maybe
various...
just a short answer.
Yeah, okay.
Answer.
Well, I would say to adapt, you can, of course, adapt the land use according to changing rainfall patterns, so that you make sure that the negative effect of climate change is not so apparent. So I know, of course, well, but this is not related to Africa, but more like deltas, that they change to crops in agriculture that are resistant for salination, so that they really build on those changing from sweet water to salt water, that they can cope with this. So they just change the crops that they grow in the field to cope with salination. So this is just one example of adaptation related to spatial planning and also land use.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Thank you. When we spoke before, we agreed that we would like to talk about this wonderful graphic. Can we see it on the screen? Oh yes, great, yes. So when looking to this cycle here, yeah, when I'm looking to all the circular segments here of this graphics and all the text in it, that reminds me very much of many themes we are talking about in FIG. And let me focus a little on the segment at the right-hand side called efficiency. Yeah, and there it reads data and information, financing, regulatory frameworks, difficult to pronounce, innovative governance, and all this is most important to support any good governance, not only water governance. And that reminds me very much on all we are doing here in FIG, and seen more specifically through the lens of geospatial information. Sorry, I'm the chair of Commission on Spatial Information Management. All these items are very close to the central parts of the working spatial data infrastructure. You need data and information, of course. You need financing, you need regulatory frameworks, you need innovative governance, and data is a foundation of any good information system. Standards are a crucial part, as was clearly explained by David and Grit some a while ago. So can you comment on that? How important is data, is information? Which data are needed? Data needed that we are used to process, such as Earth observation data, surveying data, digital height models, whatever. What would you say?
Well, I think, of course, you need data because that allows governments to make well-informed decisions, and that's also the governance part, of course, in water governance. And I think policies and regulatory frameworks really help to manage water as a resource and make sure that we distribute this scarce resource in some areas equally over the various user groups of water. So in that sense, I think it's very important to have both the regulatory framework and policies in place. And this also requires governments to discuss with their neighboring governments, because water management and catchment areas cross borders. So in that sense, it's also a political topic, I would say. Yes, and we have to seek for innovative solutions to cope with the negative effects of climate change and to be able to find a sustainable strategy. And I think this report that is published touches upon such strategies, and so that's why I also really would recommend to read you to read the report, because it explores some practices in Africa for managing water resources. And I think it's not only important for Africa, but also other continents can learn from this, because I think the nature of the challenges that we face are similar in other continents as well. And yes, and as you mentioned, I would say like the information to, well, first to grasp the problem, you need to know what the problem is, and you need data to really analyze the problem, and then also look for solutions to address them in a sustainable way, and seek resilient pathways for the future.
And the role of, is there a role of a surveyor in that area here? What would you say?
I did not get your question. What kind of officer?
Is there a role for surveyors?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, of course. I mean, it all relates to land. I mean, it's water is very much depending on the topography for the runoff of the water and also groundwater. So it is always located, related to a location, and that's also where land administration comes in. Because you need to seek solutions together with the landowners to look for bottom-up approaches, in addition to the framework that's there, but you need to reach out to the people who are affected, and also to create awareness about their behavior and what they can do at a local level. So it must be scalable solutions, and definitely you also need to reach out to the people on the ground and the land users. And well, that's also where, of course, the whole land administration system comes into play, and that's also why the surveyor is so important in this sense.
Yes, Maria, we could continue for a long time to speak about that topic, but I have a look to the time. I have to take care of the time. And so I would like to thank you very much. And we have to move on to the next speaker or to the next part of this session. And with that, back to you, Mikael.
Thank you, Hartmut. Very interesting discussion to follow. There was one question I noticed, and I think it's quite a general one. And it is, how can we get a copy of the publication? And as this is also an FIG publications, all of them should be at least available through our website. So I'm sure you can find it there whenever it's available or ready to be published. Then we'll move on to the next item, and it is we are bouncing between different types of agenda items, and I think this one is a very important and very serious one. And we don't talk too much about it within the FIG perhaps, but it is a really, really important one. And it's about international boundaries. Many of us lives in a situation where we do have stable and friendly relationships with our neighboring countries, of course, and we have agreed where the boundaries are, and there are no major or perhaps not even any disputes. But I guess this is also not just because of the relationship we have with our neighboring countries. It's also because the boundaries are often then well defined, monumented, documented, agreed, and so on. And this is a role where FIG can play an important role to define the surveyor's responsibility, work methods, and so on. And to help us on this subject today, we have Chaim Schrebro, an internationally recognized senior expert on state boundaries and former Director General of Survey of Israel. And as you all know, he's been heavily involved in the FIG part here for many, many years. So Chaim, we will start by giving us a background, an introduction to present two publications before we continue with a short discussion. Again, I do encourage you all to take this opportunity to ask him questions about FIG and international boundaries. So please, Chaim, the virtual floor is yours. We start there.
Thank you, Mikael, and congratulations on being re-elected for another 4 years. The two publications, boundary publications, FIG publications, one of them, the first one was International Boundary Making, published a few years ago. And the second one is about international boundaries on unstable ground. This is very much connected with the previous item, actually, because it refers to boundaries in rivers, in lakes, and on glaciers. All of these are influenced by global warming. Yes, so actually these boundaries are not stable. And I'll come to it later on back. Now, regarding the first publication, International Boundary Making, this is a methodological publication regarding the international boundary making process from the beginning, the delineation of the boundary in a peace agreement or a boundary agreement, and then the demarcation of the boundary on the ground, the placement of the monuments, then the surveying, documentation, which is very important, I'll come to it later, and then the maintenance of the boundary. Now, in addition to that, this publication contains cases all over the world, mainly in Asia and Africa, because you already referred to it, that boundaries in Europe, yes, are well maintained for many years, so they are relatively stable. They are not stable in rivers because the river changes every second, yes. So, but there are already arrangements, yes, in these rivers where the boundary or how the two states should behave regarding the boundary when the river changes. Now, in other parts, like in Africa and Asia, there is the heritage of the colonial heritage, actually. The colonial powers in the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, and even before, they decided what should be the boundaries. And their definition was not good enough. Yes, sometimes they said, okay, it's on the crest of the mountains. But we know that the crest of the mountains is a very vague definition, yes? And in the river, well, we know that the river may be of a width of kilometers and it can wind, yes, between the seasons. So there is sometimes there are disputes between the new countries that were established after the colonial time. And it's still, many states are still negotiating actually the boundaries between them. So this methodological publication is very important for them, but it's even important for other countries because of the maintenance process. Now things change, geology changes, yes, and actually the second publication, which refers to the boundaries in rivers and lakes that are drying today because of global warming. Yes, so if a river changes or loses its water, then the question is whether the boundary should follow the change in the river, or if it doesn't change, then one of the states may lose the accessibility to the river. So there should be other arrangements regarding the use of water, which refers to the previous actually discussion before we began our discussion. Now there is another reason for the change for unstable boundaries, which is tectonic movement of plates. Now, this is actually ongoing all over the world, all the time. It's not in the magnitude of rivers. Yes, and rivers, in addition, are 1/3 of the world boundaries. Yes, but since there is such a tectonic movement, then the question is what to do with the coordinates. First of all, all documentations are sometimes not based on coordinates. So we have to transform the old documentation to a new one based on coordinates to be more precise for future maintenance. Now, as you go to more precise definition, then the question is, if there is a tectonic movement, then sometimes you have to adapt, yes, the coordinates to new systems. So we actually recommend to go to ITRF and other things. I'm not going to elaborate on this, but these are the two existing, yes, FIG publications, and I'm now working on a third one regarding maritime boundaries. And this will accomplish actually the subject. Maritime boundaries are much younger, since most of them since World War II, and there is a special importance in the EEZ. Once it was regularly important for the territorial sea, but today the exclusive economic zone, yes, which can extend to 200 miles, nautical miles, is very important because you can drill for a few thousand kilometers in order to find gas and other things, oil. So it's more important today. So these are the publications.
Thank you, Chaim. Can you please tell us the reference numbers to these publications? Do you have it?
First one is publication number 52 on international boundary making, and the second one is number 76, publication 76, on international boundaries on unstable ground.
Thank you so much. Some follow-up question. I heard you mention about the maritime boundaries, and directly came up to my mind that I'm also part of a body called the ABLOS, Advisory Board of the Law of the Sea. That is IHO and IUG together, basically. But FIG, I was thinking the work that you've been doing, or the work you've been doing, would be the wrong word, but that you are actually leading and deeply involved in. Are there other organizations involved as well, or is it just FIG?
Well, first of all, there are other organizations, not in the level of FIG, not surveying, not organizations of surveyors. The reason that I brought it to FIG was that stability. I mean, I would say that the title is stability. Stability is important for international relations. Stability of international boundaries is of utmost importance in peacekeeping throughout the world. Now, stability of international boundaries is crucial and a prerequisite for the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, in addition to that, the International Court of Justice, already in 1962, in the case dealing with discussing the case between Thailand and Cambodia, stated that when two states establish a boundary, a primary object is to achieve stability and finality. There is a slide here, if they show it. Do the people see it? Yes?
They see probably the two publications, I think, at the moment.
This one.
Now they're back to the slide, yes.
Yes, so actually, so when two states establish a boundary, a primary object is to achieve stability and finality. This was stated by the International Court of Justice. Now, surveyors play a central role in the boundary making process. And it's not only about international boundaries. Of course, it's internal boundaries, cadastral boundaries, any kind of boundaries. Now, FIG is the global organization of surveyors and therefore has a special role regarding methodology and standards for precise and sustainable boundaries to support global requirements. Now, when I came with the idea to prepare such a publication, I came to the president at that time in Sydney, and to Stig Enemark, yes. And he said, well, I'm fond of it, but you have also to introduce it to the president-elect, Chi Haitio, yes. So I suggested him this, and he said, well, this is wonderful, yes, I'm supporting it. You have to create a subcommittee on this subject, the goal of which will be to prepare this publication. Yes.
Yeah.
And then, well, because of I was 1 year before, I was the director of a working week conference in Eilat, and I met there, made relations with the president of ISPRS, yes, and the vice president, and I suggested that maybe they join to it, yes, and they said, well, they are ready, and maybe all the board of GIS. But then I came again to the president of FIG and said, no, we want this to be our baby, yes.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Therefore, it's an FIG, yes. And but in addition to that, before we published it, he went to the United Nations and he asked the cartographic section of the United Nations to peer review the whole publication, and they did it. Actually, every word in that publication. So actually, it was reviewed by them, and as I see, following let's say the maritime boundary publication, or maybe in parallel, I think that it's a good idea to come to UNGGIM. Actually, at that time, I was involved in the construction of the UNGGIM. It was only a premature stage, yes. But maybe today we have to combine efforts between FIG and UNGGIM, because FIG is based mainly is a voluntary, of course, organization based mainly on organizations, not always, most of them not governmental institutes. Yes,
Yes.
Governmental institutes are also part of FIG. Yes, but when I tried to come to the Director General's Forum, yes, with a questionnaire, the response was not, I would say, very successful. Yes.
Okay.
So we have to find a way, actually,
Yes.
to combine efforts with UNGGIM, because we are more mature now than we used to be before.
Thank you, Chaim. This is a very interesting discussion. I think we could continue quite a while because there are so many follow-up questions, but unfortunately we have some time limits. But I will encourage member associations to have more people involved in this working group. I think you need more resources to have the discussion to be very fruitful. And it's very interesting, as you're saying, that perhaps we should also have discussions with other international organizations. Thank you so much, Chaim. This has been very, very fruitful.
One additional word. Each of the publications of these two is based also on cases, special cases. Yes. So actually, in both publications actually contain data and lessons learned in special cases of members of FIG.
Thank you very much. I think we need to stop here because otherwise I have probably 10 more questions, but we can take that in Poland. We need to sit down and have a good cup of coffee with you and discuss this. Thank you so much. Hartmut, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you. We are going to move to the next speaker, and FIG is one of the founding partners of the Global Land Tool Network, and FIG has contributed to the development of land tools with this GLTN network since 2006. The network has developed a global land partnership of 80 members, including international civil society organizations, international finance institutions, international research and training institutions, donors, and professional bodies. Tangible results of the partnership include reports on topical issues in the land sector. The cover page of the new manual, Valuation of Unregistered Land, a practice manual, reads, "A world in which everyone enjoys secure tenure rights." A world in which everyone enjoys secure tenure rights. Sounds like a dream, but such a dream must be dreamed before it can come true. So let me welcome Diane Dumashi, our next speaker. Diane is the Vice President of FIG, and should be known to just about everyone in this virtual conference room here. It will be a pleasure to chat with you, Diane, about some recent activities of the Global Land Tools Network. But as a start, do please provide us with an overview of GLTN and FIG's role and purpose. Diane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hartmut, and it's good to have a chat for the benefit of all with you on this subject. So, you know, by way of background, you've done some of it in the intro, but I'll just sort of give you a little capsule. That the Global Land Tool Network, which is known as GLTN, the acronym, you know, it's an extremely dynamic network, and as you pointed out, it's multi-sectorial alliance of international partners, of which FIG is one. And incidentally, FIG was part of the founding steering group on it. But it's all the partners are absolutely committed to increasing access to land and tenure security for all. So, you know, that's a particular focus on the poor, on women and youth, you know, which we all know particularly vulnerable. But it comes from that stat which everybody throws around, where less than 30% of people in the developing world have registered land rights. And actually, if you'd listened to, you know, if you happen to be fortunate enough to be in an earlier technical session, you know, that not every country has all of their tenure registered, and that includes the UK. There is a small percentage where title still isn't registered, and there's a backdrop to that. But, you know, mostly it's about a pro-poor approach and helping an awful lot of society that doesn't have access to land. And it's about the network of international partners, and we can talk about them in a bit, in a minute, perhaps in conversation, but it's about them together developing, researching tools in order to address a range of problems. And these problems are neatly clustered into 18 or so thematics. Again, that's a bit more of the detail. And I've explained the real why, but it all started by Clarissa Augustinus, who was actually an honorary member of FIG, where she had the vision and the motivation. And her vision was, look, let's fill the gap that conventional land administration is not actually addressing in this space of secure land tenure and you know, title. And so there was lots of work streams that come out of it. So that just gives you a sort of a platform as to the where and what.
Okay, Diane, thanks for your impressive introduction. As always, very inspiring. So, yeah, you're now co-lead of the International Professional Bodies Cluster. That sounds really awe-inspiring. So can you tell us a little bit what does that mean?
Well, I'm glad it's awesome, because we are part of the professional cluster, we being FIG, so all our members. So I alluded to the fact, and you actually did highlight it. So this international coalition of partners are put into these clusters, one of which is the professional clusters, and FIG would be a member of that, as would you know, other groupings such as you know, Cadastre, for example, is also a member, but you'd also find the Arab Union of Surveyors, who incidentally is my co-cluster lead on this, Commonwealth Association of Surveying and Land Economists, RICS, etc., etc. There are quite so many. But the other clusters would include research and training institutions. So actually a lot of FIG academic members might well sit in that cluster because they want to put on that specific research hat. And I refer to a past president, Stig Enemark. He sits in that cluster, but also will step over into the professional cluster. And what I find really interesting, and when we're all talking together, is the bilateral and multi-organizations that are actually in their own cluster. And we've got rural and urban civil society organizations as a cluster. And indeed, when I was running the African Task Force, becoming the African Regional Network, I was in Cape Town with Jenny Whittle and her university, and we brought in a member from that cluster at Slum Dwellers International. So the idea is to try and work within your cluster, but increasingly work across clusters. And that's got to be a good thing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. You made it very clear, so I could understand. Thanks a lot for that. It's now, yeah, brought some light in the darkness. And so for me, a very personal remark on that. Yeah, And well, FIG has been cooperating with this Global Land Tools Network since the very beginning. It was a foundation member back in 2006. Can you tell a little bit about the story, about the development of GLTN and of the FIG involvement in GLTN over all these years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big question perhaps people might be thinking is why? Why are we involved? And the quick answer is that because, and we've heard about it in other forums and even in the panel today, that surveyors actually want to make a difference. We make a difference in what we do. And this is one really good way to leverage how we really input to making that contribution to society, if you like. And if you think of the 5 Ps of sustainability, this network and our involvement in it matches that. So, the 5 Ps, and I'll go through them reasonably briefly. Partnership is one. Well, the network is all about partnership between us, but also reaching out to communities with the tools and approaches that are being developed by the partners. And if we are a partner, which we are, FIG, all of our members are part of that process. And maybe we can come back and unpack that in a little bit more on specifics. But the projects that are then done is the people, if you like, and that's another of the 5 Ps of sustainability. And our commitment to doing those projects, you mentioned, for example, unregistered land, which James Kavanagh was the project lead on in the last year. Again, come back to that with a bit more detail if need be. But that is an example exactly of the projects that we and our members will actually do as a result of being in a GLTN network. And the third, and there was a touch on water, for example, the planet. Land and water, the theme of our conference, cuts across all of our commission activities. So anybody within FIG network has a role to play in the project development of GLTN. And I guess it's really a plea with, and that's why we're always raising it, which is why we always partner with GLTN at our working weeks, which is why we always have a platform with Danilo, who is our immediate project lead in GLTN, because of the importance of what we can do.
Yeah, let me ask you a final question, Diane. We talked about the past and the present, and of course there is also a future, and thinking about the next years. Say, well, the SDGs are SDGs 2030. What do you see in this cooperation here for the next couple of years? What are the next steps of this cooperation?
Well,
short answer, please.
Yeah, the cooperation is going full steam ahead. There's an awful lot. I just want to mention 2 things that happened last year, because they're quite important, because they were launched at this conference. One is the valuation of unregistered land, which was a manual that's been launched. And again, RICS as a member was key in that, but so were others. And then the other was the urban-rural land linkages. And again, that was a cross-cluster initiative. Eugene was doing an awful lot. He sits in the research cluster, along with professional cluster led by Commission 7, which was Daniel. But going forward, to specifically answer your question, so there's a work plan that's going to the steering committee of GLTN, all the cluster leads, so that's me representing FIG and Rafiq representing AU as the professional clusters, will be in that dialogue. And we've got Cadastre, who's a member of the professional cluster. They put in a project. RICS has followed up with another project. Nigerian SIRCON, Survey of Institute Registrar, so that's Kabir, has also put in a project on fit for purpose land administration. So in the next 18 months, there's an awful lot that's already happened, But watch this space. These work plans keep rolling over. And if all our members just need to ask me as perhaps the first point of call, always welcome to listen and engage and share with what your ideas are so that we take them to GLTN to get some support.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot for that, Diane. Unfortunately, we have to stop. We have our master is the watch here. And so thank you very much for your introduction, for your speech here, and for the chat that we had. It was great chatting with you. And I give back to Michael for the next part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hartmut. Thank you, Diane. Always inspiring to listen to you. And now we are changing subject completely again, or completely. It's still within the FIG family. We're moving now to say more to the history side of the FIG work. One thing that has always fascinated me, at least, is a deep interest in surveying history that several of our colleagues have. It is very important that our heritage is taken well care of and brought forward to the rest of us. And I would say that FIG, we are very fortunate to have a permanent institution on this. And it's called the International Institution for the History of Surveying. And it is a very productive institution. Unfortunately, neither Jim Smith nor Jan de Greve could be with us here today, but our FIG director, Louise Friis Hansen, she managed to catch them on the phone just before the working week and talk to them. Jim qualified as a land surveyor and has been active in FIG since 1968. Almost, I need to repeat, 1968 is as long as I live, more or less. He has also authored various survey-oriented texts over the years. And Jan de Greve, he started as a specialist in evaluation. And he has had a deep interest in rare and early books for many, many years. His FIG engagement started in 1976, and already 85, he and Jim, they formed the history group within the FIG. So among the tremendous achievements that this section has actually done, we must mention the focus on the Struve Geodetic Arc and how they ensured it to be a UNESCO World Heritage Monument. With that said, I would like us all to hear the interview that Louise did with them. So please.
Good.
Welcome. On the line, I have the honor to have both Jan de Greve and Jim Smith. Jan is connecting from Brussels and Jim from the UK. Being in the 80s, Jan and Jim have been long-term and very faithful active volunteers in FIG and have contributed to FIG for many years. Jan and Jim have established the Permanent Institution of History Surveying in Measurement and have over the years organized numerous workshops and symposia on the history of surveying. Jan, could I please ask you to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little about your long-time journey in FIG?
Hello, all of you, and thank you to be there. I started the first meeting with FIG was 1976 on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Brussels Association of Surveyors. And my first real contribution was an exhibition in 1978 in Paris on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the first meeting held in Paris, 1878. In 75, I presented also a small work in French for the young surveyors. Since then, I'm now 75, and since 75, I missed only a couple of meetings I missed the one in Peking, that was 10 years after Tiananmen disaster. I missed one in South America that was due to work, and I missed one in Israel, and that was because my godchild was married that time, but I went to most of them except the one of the last year, of course, in Holland that was cancelled due to the pandemic.
That is amazing, and it's wonderful also to hear that there were also young surveyors in 1975. So,
Yes,
what about you, Jim? Can you just tell the audience a little about you?
Well, what Jan has just said, my equivalent, I've written out for part of the thank you, the honorary membership.
Jim, we are gathered here together because the two of you have collected the most amazing 7 volumes of books on history on surveying. So, Jim, can you tell me when did you start working on these 7 volumes, and what gave you the idea to start this quite amazing journey?
Yes, around 1968, I had the idea of writing a book about the history of surveying. After a few years, it was quite obvious that was too wide or too large a topic, and I ought to make it more individual. So I initially concentrated on the expeditions to Peru and Lapland and their results, and hence a book in 1986 called Plane to Spheroid. Now, we didn't actually sort of detail that we would have 7 volumes at the beginning. It more or less started we would have 1, and then we finished up with 7. So the next step led to me going to Cape Town in 1988, because I'd been told by Jan and others that they held some interesting records of a chap called Captain Webb, just on the topic of measuring meridians in order to determine the size and shape of the Earth. Now, when I got to Cape Town, it wasn't just a single school book size set of notes. It was 12 volumes of immaculately handwritten, each with about 300 pages in them. So that was a massive amount of material. And the Surveyor General in Cape Town at the time said, would I like it microfilmed? So this he did, and then I took a year to turn that microfilm into text in one of the early computers.
Wow.
Now, shall I go on just a little bit more?
Yes, please.
This led to writing a book about R.S. Webb in 1995, and you'll find him mentioned in the, I think, the first volume. At the same time, Jan and I were beginning to expand on the Webb's notes, and particularly on India at the time, because George Everest had an anniversary during the period we were interested. And of course, he was another measurer of the Earth. My book on him was published in 1999. Meanwhile, the FIG meeting in Melbourne of 1994 had come along, and the suggestion of aiming for a UNESCO World Heritage Monument arose. Whatever next, I thought. And Jan will tell you a little about that which led to the 7 volumes that are being talked about today.
Thank you very much, Jim. So, Jan, what happened then from 94?
In 94 was a meeting held in Melbourne, so that was Southern Australia. And I had the chance to chair the Commission 1 at that time. And one of the things we created was first the International Institute for History of Surveying and Measurement. That's where I'm still the chairman. Next to that, we created that at that moment the Young Surveyors. And a third thing was the 900 identification or certification of quality. So all that happened during 1994 when we proposed to the General Assembly to try and have the Struve meridian to be preserved in what we call the 9 countries, because I forgot that there was a small island of Hoogland between the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and the mainland, which was then Letland, Lithuania, and Litauen. And down we went, and over the years we met all these gentlemen, 3 by country, and so we came down over Belarus and Ukraine to Moldova, where Maria greeted us. And so we have been traveling over all these years to try and get the people involved of each of the countries as to go locally to find the places where Struve and General Tenner, who was then the Russian equivalent for the Russian Tsar, to identify the locations where they have been measured and to monument many of these places. So we have traveled quite a lot. We've drunk a little vodka as well, as the meetings ended generally after 4:30, and then everyone had to say na zdrowie, good health to everyone. And so we created a good humor and a real good working party of the 10 countries together. So, Louise, that's how we started.
This is really fantastic, and it's nice to hear that it has both been amazing work, but also fun work for you.
Oh yes, yes. The vodka party was very nice as well. Yes, Jim and I would particularly thank for the publication of this work of a long term. John Hoggle was the person of the FIG Foundation who took contact with Trimble, our main sponsor in FIG, and they had the idea to prepare 100 sets of the 7 volumes and to give to FIG Foundation the records and the benefit of this auction. We're particularly happy that this long-term work will help the next generation to have a good insight of the evolution of the size and the figure of the Earth that we have been studying for a long time, let's say from 85 till last year. Thank you very much and have a good day in the FIG week, and we're looking for new blood to come and join our board. Thank you very much.
And thanks very much to both of you, Jan and Jim, and thank you for letting us publish these books. Bye.
Wow.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, Jim and Jan, for this interview. It's always, I would say, always very inspiring to hear them talk about the history in surveying. They're always so enthusiastic and engaged in what they're doing. So thank you. And I think we also should note that the surplus from these publications will go directly to the FIG Foundation, if I understood it correctly. And I would say, well, what a fantastic contribution to the foundation. I will come back to the FIG Foundation shortly. But first, Hartmut, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, enthusiastic and inspired. That's a very good point. And it's a very good point to come to our next part here. And it is a very special pleasure for me to welcome our next guests, Claire Buxton from Canada and Cemal Kıvılcım from Turkey. Both are anything but old men in dark suits, as I said earlier. And both are highly essential persons for me. They are both people who stimulate my inspiration I still feel in FIG. Claire leads the volunteer community surveyor program within the Young Surveyors Network. And Cemal is chair of our new working group, Geospatial Next, of Commission 3, where next points to the next generation. FIG's motto of the current term is volunteering for the future. Refined, it says, I quote, volunteering for FIG means volunteering for our profession, society, and Earth at the same time. I can think of few activities in FIG that could better help to making this motto come true than what the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program and the working group Geospatial Next have planned together and are on their way to implementing. We will talk more about all of this in a moment, but before that, Claire, Cemal, we invite you to introduce us to your work. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hartmut. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I wanted to start with a bit of a story. Young Claire, as an undergrad at Otago University, was thinking into herself, what could I do to use my skills towards a cause that's greater than my own self? I skip forward a few years of feeling sick of feeling helpless in a world where there's a lot of destruction that humans really are part of. I've been using my skills as a volunteer with Survey and Spatial New Zealand and the FIG Young Surveyors Network, and then finally found the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program. So as Hartmut said, I am the lead of the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program now. Aside from volunteering, I do get paid as well to do another job, which is my full-time job as a project manager with Underhill Geomatics, and I am a licensed cadastral surveyor in New Zealand. So I bring a mix of private consulting experience, and I have got some postgraduate studies in advanced land tenure. Cemal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Claire. Merhaba from Istanbul. As Hartmut introduced, my name is Cemal Özgür Kıvılcım. I have served as a volunteer of FIG around 15 years now in various roles. And each stage I got involved in FIG, it provided many experiences and good memories over the years. At this moment, I'm serving as the chair of the working group 3.6 as a part of my professional growth and, of course, for fun. Today, together with Claire, we would like to share our recent commitments to the society.
Thanks, Cemal. So if there's one thing we want you to leave here today with thinking about is, to us, FIG's sustenance comes from keeping relevant, staying current. And young surveyors, we need a purpose in order to choose and stay in a surveying career. And you can help. So I just wanted to run through our structure of this presentation very quickly. So we'll run through the tangible outcomes that the VCSP have been able to achieve and Working Group 3.6. Also, we'll touch on what we've achieved together. Second, we'd like to talk to you about who is behind these two initiatives and who we do this for. And finally, we'll touch on how we are guided and what's next for us. Before we get into that though, I'm aware that you may not know who the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program are, or Working Group 3.6. So let me start with the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program, which I'll refer to as the VCSP from Hereford. It was created back in 2017 by the Young Surveyors Network in collaboration with the Global Land Tool Network, who Diane has touched on, or GLTN, which is facilitated by the UN Habitat, and FIG Foundation. Now, the VCSP is an impactful way to get partners and young surveyors excited and involved. It is a not-profit that connects young surveyors to opportunities to volunteer their time and skills to humanitarian causes. And we focus on helping our partners secure equal access to land rights and fight environmental crises.
And as introduced by Hartmut, Working Group 3.6, Geospatial Next is dedicated to encourage next generation surveyors to develop necessary skills through the lens of Commission 3's topics. Therefore, our motto is Geospatial Next as well. Our working group aims to provide an environment for intergenerational collaboration and to demonstrate recent technologies trends that fall under spatial information management. We believe this working group is simply bringing a new synergy across Commission 3 activities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, what's the relationship status between Working Group 3.6 and the VCSP? Well, I would say they are a good match. How to integrate and increase the participation of next surveyors, next generations into commissions? This question has been addressed and revised since the spark of young surveyors back in 2006. Together, we are creating intergeneration collaboration by sharing knowledge on fit-for-purpose techniques, recent technologies, and trends. We do this under spatial information management and as well as humanitarian causes for our collaboration. We explore and experience new dimensions of our profession all together. Next slide. Thank you.
So I just want to start now on our first structure point. This is the tangibles that our groups have been able to achieve separately and together. So since its inception, we've been able to deploy 20 volunteer community surveyors, young surveyors, across 6 countries and helping 7 partners of GLTN and now Cadastre. We've also been able to have 2 e-volunteering events, one in partnership with SSSI in October last year, but also one very recently that finished 2 hours ago in partnership with Crowd2Map and Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. And we've also been able to run a wisdom workshop with many knowledge partners who you'll hear from soon. We've received recognition outside of this, beyond this platform, with an article that Israel Taiwo and myself have written for RICS. Now, we've received over 1,400 applications over the past year for our events and programs and initiatives within the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program. We've also received applications and we've had 7 Volunteer Community Surveyor mentors or VCS mentors. Over to you, Tamal.
Thanks, Claire. Working Group 3.6 contributes and encourages young surveying professionals, both soft and technical skills, and also developing these things all around new technologies by sharing good stories from significant innovators and contributors to the society. In 2019, when we had the Commission 3's physical meeting that was organized in Cluj-Napoca in Romania, and a day of young authors, technical sessions, and interactive panel forum focusing on academic and professional life experiences across generations was organized. We are closely collaborating with CSP since the beginning of the pandemic, and we are in preparation as well for new projects right after this working week. Collaborating together with VCSP is an opportunity to unlock the potential of open-minded, engaged, and internationally skilled young surveyors who are familiar, of course, to the core values of FIG. Here are some activities VCSP and the Working Group 3.6 took just during this working week alone. Working Group had a technical session for geospatial analytic use cases, and Working Group and VCSP participants took initiatives and roles and responsibilities related to other Commission 3 events. Just to name a few, Israel Taiwo presented a paper about his time as a volunteer community surveyor in Uganda and the benefits of being involved in VCSP. Roshni Sharma ran a mentoring session about SSI mentoring program and how VCSP has created a pilot mentoring program for young surveyors network. We present a joint paper led by Roshni as well with the title E-Volunteering in Unprecedented Times. Tom Kito led our team of the workshop together with the volunteers and 2 other NGOs, followed by a 24-hour mapathon for humanitarian cause of FGM, female genital mutation. This to give necessary base maps and will help the teams to avoid girls in danger. This organized was together with Craft2Map Tanzania and Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, as Claire mentioned. And I think you will also agree to us the significance of such a collaboration with other NGOs. Mapathon is still on, and I'm looking to my dashboard and I see over 2,200 buildings have been digitized. Back to Claire.
Thank you, Jamal. That's great numbers to see and something I'm very proud of to say we're still active even as we speak. Now, we're not alone on these endeavours. We represent some inspiring young surveyors who dedicate hours of their time to run the show. Our goals are ambitious and we need to work together to get this done. Hence why we have such a great team pulled together. Now, I want to recognise the contribution as well of all the volunteers beyond our team shown here, both past and present. So I'd like to talk about the who as well. We have some knowledge and technology partners who we are helping, but also they are helping us. So as you can see, there's a few quotes there from Stephanie saying a welcome injection of passion and energy to tackle global challenges. And from Justice, we are encouraged to see more young surveyors being engaged through the VCSP, and they see the importance at Spatial Collective of having more younger surveyors engaged, mentored and trained. It only makes the profession merrier. Now, let's see if this works.
Claire, we have 1 minute left.
Okay. I assume you can hear noise? No. Goes to show you can practice all you like, but you never know what's going to happen. Let's just wait to see if the sound comes through. No, it doesn't look like it's going to work, so perhaps we'll move on. So That's Justice Wambai with Cadastre, who was speaking about the 3 volunteer community surveyors who've just recently, one of them has finished her deployment and 2 are going to continue on. We've also got support from Pamoja Trust, which is a GLTN partner. These are some quotes from the volunteer community surveyors that are also involved. Now, I see we're running out of time, so I'd like to see once if this next video will work, and if not, we'll go on to what's next.
With Act Together, which is who are partners with the Global Lantern Network and UN Habitat, working on the STDM project in Bali, where we were helping the urban poor get the customary certificate of ownership. I would like to take this opportunity to thank FIG for helping me volunteer my skills, time and energy to help my community. Thank you.
So what's next for us? Well, I just want to touch briefly on the importance of having a clear vision, commitment and purpose. We have 4 strong and shared values, and we have a guiding light from our 4-year way forward strategy. We have a lot of intangible outcomes that will help us achieve our goals and become scalable and sustainable. Jamal, would you like to take here?
Yes, thank you, Claire.
Very briefly, please. We are running out of time.
Of course.
Okay.
I would like to just say, working group would like to ensure the collaboration with BCSP as a prototype and an example to show clearly the long-term gain benefits of volunteering for national members and the FIG itself. I just would like to emphasize that, remember, investing today's young surveyors to take roles and contribution is the link to sustainable working groups, commissions. This means a lot for our future of our profession as well. And could we just, next slide?
Absolutely. So we are scaling up sustainably through our geographic diversity and succession planning. We are committed for the future of the profession of young surveyors' careers and of communities in need. We are committed.
And I would like to add my personal perspective is that FIG is actually our professional family. And as individuals, we are not equal, but even though we are equal, but we are not given the same opportunities. So we need to be innovative, enthusiastic, and collaborative. All commitments, big or small, is a step forward. And now it's time to step up. As a famous quote says, after all, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. And as a shorten of this is what we experienced through this working week. We would like to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Hartmut. To the FIG Office Administration, Working Week organizers, our supporting partners, and of course, the Council. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, thank you both for your presentation and for all the words. And I would like to leave it with Jamal's wise words here. And let's move on. And over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Hartmut. It's interesting. We're going from the history section where they actually said that they will donate the surplus from their publications into the FIG foundations. We talked about now from the BCSP on how to engage the young surveyors and how they can be involved and so on and so on. And now we're moving on to the final part of our journey within this General Assembly, and that is on the FIG Foundation. So this has been quite a nice journey throughout this General Assembly number 4. So celebrating milestones virtually is definitely not the same as doing it live. We all know that. But today we have to do our best. We need to try. Because it is impressive, I would say, that the FIG Foundation this year, it celebrates 20 years. It was established 20 years ago. So I think this is very impressive, and actually my biggest congratulations to the FIG and FIG family. But also what's I think is very impressive is that there's one person that has been involved throughout the whole journey from the beginning, and it's still on the board, the FIG Foundation board, and that's our own John Hohol. And John, this is also a very impressive achievement to keep up the momentum, keep up the interest and so on. Currently, John is chairing the FIG Foundation board, and as he will tell you more about the whole story, you will understand how he got involved and where we are today. But before I leave the floor to John, the foundation has enabled many young surveyors to be part of the FIG family by supporting them to FIG events and so on, but also in other ways. So this will be interesting to understand where we are now with the FIG Foundation, and also perhaps looking into the future, and we can have that kind of discussions with John afterwards. So please, John, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mikael. I very much appreciate it. Next slide, please. As Mikael had mentioned, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the foundation. 6.5 weeks ago, approximately, actually, was the date, May 11th. May 11th, 2001, at its last session of the working week in Seoul, Korea, the General Assembly endorsed the statutes of the FIG Foundation, which was established by transferring the former FIG Education Foundation from Australia to the FIG office in Denmark. The first foundation board of directors consisted of Holger Magel from Germany as president, with directors Stig Edemark, Ian Greenway, myself, and Ian Williamson. The following year, Holger became president of FIG and handed over the presidency to me for the foundation. Next slide, please. The administration of the foundation. Foundation is located and administered by the FIG office. A board of directors chaired by the president makes decisions for the foundation. And of course, the board of directors is appointed by the FIG council. Next slide, please. The purpose of the foundation is the funding of educational and capacity building projects and scholarships. The FIG Foundation raises funds to secure a sustainable future for surveyors. The donations finance educational and capacity building projects, scholarships, especially in developing countries, and of course, countries in transition, and encourage research to all disciplines of surveying and to help disseminate the results of that research. Next slide, please. Here's the current board of directors for 2020. Unfortunately, Professor David Mitchell had to resign at the end of 2020 due to work commitments. The other five still are on the board, including myself, Mike, Winston, Enrico, and Zhang. Zhang represents the FIG Council on the board. Next slide, please. This gives an overview of the grants that have been awarded by the foundation since we started making the awards in 2002. As you can see, the primary beneficiaries are Africa, European, and Asian Pacific countries. It's a very, very well spread out number. And I'd like to also point out, we're happy to say that 71% of all the grants in terms of the value of the grants have been given to low income and middle income countries. Next slide, please. This shows a map of the 75 countries where the foundation has provided grants. Next slide, please. And again, this is a listing of the countries. And to date, the foundation has awarded 240 grants to surveyors in 75 countries, worth over 350,000 euros. And we very much appreciate everyone who has donated to the foundation to help us maintain this. Okay.
Thank you, John. It's very interesting to see what the FIG Foundation has contributed to. It's a large number of, younger surveyors that has been supported over the years to FIG events and in other means. You mentioned, I'll go back 20 years in time now, I hope if you start there. You mentioned the Education Foundation from Australia, you said. That was kind of before the FIG Foundation.
Yes, that came out of the 1994 FIG Congress in Melbourne. They had to set aside some funds resulting from the surplus from the Congress, and that's where that originated. One other thing I should mention, both Hartmut and Robin said their first FIG meeting was the Congress in Montreux, and that was my first as well. And one of the first things I noticed about going to Montreux is they have palm trees in Switzerland.
That's interesting. A lot of good things must have happened in 1981.
Yes, I think so. I think so.
Perhaps the others in the audience that also were there the first time. But that's interesting. So, and since then, there's been quite an interesting journey for the FIG Foundation. And to my understanding, the amount of money within the foundation has increased steadily. But I guess there are still, if we look into the future, how do you see the development of the FIG Foundation, where we are today and where we're going?
Well, of course, I outlined, basically how we're looking at distributing the funds, and of course, that's what we would like to continue. One area we would like to work on is a closer collaboration with the members, the member associations, the academic members, the affiliates, and also the corporate members, because those are not only our lifeblood, but also a good opportunity to promote the foundation and help us distribute funds to where they belong.
That's very interesting. How it's always it's very important to have the good collaboration and a message to I guess one of the messages to the member association is that this is an FIG Foundation that we are all kind of responsible for, so it needs to be developed together. We have the FIG Foundation board, but it is of mutual interest for that it will continue to develop in a good way. So, but depending on looking at the donors, where we are today and looking into the future, do you see any radical differences that needs to be taken there, or?
Well, first of all, I'd like to mention a couple of things. At the beginning, we had our first FIG Foundation dinner in 2002 at the Congress in Washington. And that was the first time that we were able to actually raise funds for the foundation. Jack Dangerman had issued a challenge saying that he would donate $25,000 if we could match that in Washington during that week. We actually ended up, I believe, around $56,000. So we did match it, and it was a very generous donation from Jack. And I would also like to point out that since the beginning, since that dinner, Trimble donated at that dinner. Since then, they have also contributed over 160,000 euros in support of the foundation. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, that has affected the foundation greatly, as our primary source currently for donations is we get a small contribution from each registration fee of 10 euros. And of course, since the working week was canceled last year and the low rates this year, we don't have that income from those 2 years. We also have an income, a small amount from the FIG Foundation dinners. And of course, that did not happen last year or this year, or actually in 2019, because we had the wonderful opera experience in Hanoi. But again, those are our primary venue or means of raising funds currently. We also, of course, get individual donations. For example, last year, as part of the registration fee for 2020, we did receive 655 euros from individual donors. And we also receive occasionally other separate donations. As an example, we received a donation in Hanoi from Sercon from Nigeria of 5,000 US dollars. We also have received donations this year from individuals as well. So it's very much appreciated, but it's still a continuing challenge because we would like to give out more grants, obviously, but we are very limited, due to what funds we do have coming in.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's as you say, we are used to a way of working, and suddenly with the pandemic, everything is turned upside down, and all our business models, so if I may use that word, is challenging us. So we need to look into the future. I hope next year, and I guess I'll send this to Rudolf a little bit more. Then I guess I hope we can celebrate the foundation in perhaps in a proper way than through a virtual media. Final message, Sean, to the member associations or any member to the FIG?
Yes. Again, I would like to thank everyone who has contributed, whether visibly or not. Obviously, if you attend a working week or Congress, you have contributed as part of your registration fee. And I would definitely like to call out and thank those that have contributed separately too. I would also like to give a special thank you to the 23 people from 14 countries who have served on the board over the 20 years. They have all generously served as volunteers, just like most of us in FIG, receiving no compensation for their time, expertise, and activities. So I would like to give a big thank you as well.
Thank you very much, and I was very happy to talk to you here. So with that, I think I will hand over to Hartmut to close this GA session. So please, Hartmut, and thank you, John.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
You need to unmute, Hartmut. The classical thing.
Yes, finally, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Michael. Yes, well, we are now reaching the end of our journey along the work of FIG. We have heard about technical work, about governance, about history, about networks, and about the foundation. As Michael said at the beginning, it was a selection. Many more valuable activity could have been presented here. Nevertheless, we, the organizers and the moderators of this session, hope that you, our audience from all over the world, got an idea of what FIG is in practice. Thank you all, the speakers. Thank you to those working behind the scenes. And thank you all for being with us from all your places. I would be curious to see from where you're watching here. Perhaps next time we can create a map of that. And with that, I would like to close this session. We will now take a short break, and we will continue at 4 p.m. Central European Summer Time with the closing session, and 4 p.m. means in 6 minutes from now. So to avoid time conversion for all those of you who are somewhere else on this globe. So don't miss the closing session. We will have the closing speech of our president, and I'm really curious to hear what he has to say. And I hope there will be some other surprises which I'm not aware of yet. After that, thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I would like here from the studio to thank both Mikael and Hartmut for these 2 past hours. I hope it has been a great inspiration for all of you to see a little of what FIG is doing, and also to give you encouragement to engage more and make others from your country also to engage. But as Hartmut said, time is running, and we are having our closing in 5 minutes now. So have a short break, take a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, or depending on where you are in the world, a glass of wine. We're in many time zones. So see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you.